Welcome to the Embodied Mystic podcast, where we explore the path of feminine awakening and luscious womanhood. Together we'll be diving into topics like sacred sexuality, feminine embodiment, spiritual healing, and soulful relationships. I'm your host, Tamara Fael, tantric mentor and Aries hype girl, here to guide you back to the temple of your body and fall in love with being a woman. I look forward to journeying together. Hey beauties, welcome back to the podcast, or if you're new here, very warm welcome. Thank you for joining. It's a rainy day here in Bali, so if you can hear this like pitter-pattering, that's what it is. I am thrilled to share with you this conversation with Kristy Scher today. I loved it. Oh my gosh, it was such a rich exploration of some really profound and thought-provoking areas of motherhood. Kristy is a phenomenal woman, as well as the mother of 2 adult sons, and she is truly such a treasure trove of wisdom and has such potent insights around the developmental arc of motherhood and how being a mother can be a spiritual path for women. This conversation with Kristy is number 2 in the Conscious Mama Conversation series. These are Conscious Mama Conversations, where I will be interviewing some seriously magical mamas with medicine to share. So these are women that I've known as maidens, who are just channels of the feminine, truly impactful space holders for women, supporting them to heal and awaken. And these are sisters who've recently made the transition to motherhood and also powerhouse mothers of older children. So I believe that these are the medicine women birthing the next generation. I can't even tell you how long it's been since I've been wanting to have these conversations and really wanting to share these kind of things out into the world. So if you're as curious about motherhood as I am and want to learn from those who are walking the motherhood path in deep connection with spirit, you're definitely in the right place. In her earlier career as a perinatal and neonatal nurse, Kristy realized the essence of her work was nurturing self-attunement in a new mother, so she, in turn, could attune to and nurture her baby. Kristy witnessed this in women again and again. When our need for attunement and nurturing is met, profound emotional and spiritual growth happens organically. Helping a woman recover her capacity for exquisite self-attunement became the foundation of Kristy's work as a coach. She believes self-attunement, self-nurturing, and self-love feed a woman, and a full woman feeds the world. In addition to individual and group coaching, Kristy writes and teaches about intimacy, relationships, and the spiritual path of motherhood. We explored through themes like intimately knowing ourselves, how being in emotional connection that can really meet us feeds us deeply. We also were exploring the connection between breastfeeding and our relationship as adults with nourishment and the road back to rightful self-attunement. There is so much richness to get into here, so I'm not going to say anything more. Let's get straight into it. Welcome, Kristy. I'm so thrilled that we have this opportunity to chat.
Me too. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been so beautiful just starting my morning and having this space with you. So I feel like I first became aware of you through Jillian's one of Jillian's groups or Jillian's containers. And I felt really moved by the way that you were expressing yourself. Like there was just such clarity in the way that you could kind of like feel all the feel the depth of like your own process and others, and like speak to the nuance and all the different flavors and textures, and I just appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Yeah. I think it's an unusual thing to be in a space where women really allow themselves to be felt and to stay open to being felt by another woman. And I learned in those experiences of in reading women's shares and what would get evoked for me, like what would want to come through me. I really would feel deeply honored by the way women would very often receive me, because I could feel something very often, like I could feel a thread that wanted to be spoken to. And it is a way that I love. That is actually one of the ways that I love, is to feel the thing that wants to be free in a woman. And that's a tender thing to do, because it usually involves some degree of sort of being lanced. Like it involves some degree of like tenderness or pain in that spot that we want to get free. And I would always feel so just deeply honored when a woman would feel what I was saying or speaking to in her, that she would receive that as love. And that really changed something for me in how I understood what my role is in the world.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And it reminds me of this feeling that I've felt very often in my life, and as a woman and as a feminine being, it's like this yearning to be seen and known and loved. It's like all three together. And so I think when someone can do that, like yourself, it's like you kind of like this oracle, you have this vision where you just have these like x-ray goggles and just see inside. Yeah, I feel like it speaks to a powerful desire, and it could also just be a human desire and not necessarily a feminine one or a woman's one, but I just feel it as a woman.
Do you think that there is something unique to women in that, or maybe I should say something unique to the feminine, that, and this could be feminine in any human, but I do think that there is something about the desire to be seen, to be revealed, and to be cherished, to feel like life sort of reaching back towards you. I think that there is something unique about women who identify as primarily feminine, in this desire to be revealed, to be seen, to be beheld, to be beloved. And for many women, I think that is highly fraught. Largely, this is my lens, largely because we might have been mothered by women who themselves had never been rightfully seen or beheld or beloved. And to be mothered by that kind of woman means that we sort of lose contact with the rightness of being beloved that way.
Yeah, I feel that there's something about the love, the piece of like yearning, and like it's like this reaching out for love, and not in a way that is like needy, although I think that's that's another conversation, about needy and needs. But this part of us, the part of the feminine, which is like this plant growing towards the light, seeking love. And I do think that's a unique, in my lens anyway, of understanding the feminine, that it feels unique in that way.
I mean, having raised two sons and been married to the same man for about 30 years, I definitely feel like a different animal. And, like I feel like it was sort of like there's the feminine thing over here, and I'm a fairly big sort of personality and big sort of, I'm a big energy, and I never really felt myself reflected in what it is my husband or my sons seemed to most need in terms of nourishment in the way that they're loved, seen, of course. But I would say it's probably more true that, I've heard some teachers say that, if you asked a man and a woman or a masculine and feminine being if they would prefer to be loved or trusted, by and large, the masculine would say trusted and the feminine would say loved. And I've seen that because to be trusted feels like being loved to a man. Like I believe that men love with their integrity. Like that's how a man's love shows up, is through his integrity. And a woman loves through her faith, like the faith that she sort of imbues or gifts to someone, like the faith in their presence, in their essence, in their full expression. And so those two things, to me, faith is a quality of the heart, and integrity is also a heart quality, but it is really more about how he chooses to show up and the way he chooses to serve. And I think many women, more feminine beings, and it becomes problematic as soon as we start trying to talk about feminine women. So I may use sort of heteronormative language. That's my reference, but I do think that feminine can respond, can reflect anyone's experience, but that we love with the faith that we offer, and that faith is a kind of presence.
I'm feeling very nourished and joyful just listening to you speak and feeling into these I guess you could say like exalted properties of the feminine and the masculine and the way we love. It's just noticing, feeling all joyful. It really resonates as well, that how the masculine loves with his integrity, or shows the depth of love. And I'm definitely experiencing that in my personal relationships at the moment, calling in relationships with men where there is this deeper sense of integrity and them showing up in their heart and really caring. And it's so like, there's something so fulfilling about being in the presence of that, you know, feeling the depth of a man's care and the way that he will hold himself in integrity as the highest value. It feels so, it's like, wow, I can trust that. Like, I can just like let down my armor because I can trust these men.
Yeah. That's a beautiful thing for a man to receive, is that sort of unfurling of your nervous system, and in that, like in that sense of safety, that's really when we experience the capacity to offer our heart.
I've understood just from following you and being in your presence and learning a bit more about your work that attunement is really like the central pillar. And I mean, I'm putting this in my own words, so feel free to correct me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, feels like attunement and then self-attunement is really like at the foundation of what you're sharing. And yeah, I would love to hear about what attunement means to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've said that self-attunement is our true north, that it really gives us it enables us to sort of locate ourselves inside of the sort of the map. You know, if desire is our compass, self-attunement is actually going to give us all of our reference points for the moment, for what's arising, for what our needs are. And I think of self-attunement as sort of like, it's the umbrella under which we then can practice things like self-nurturance, self-love, boundaries. Kelly McDaniel, who wrote the book Mother Hunger, talks about nurturance, protection, and guidance as sort of like the three sort of essential qualities, or three essential sort of avenues by which a mother mothers. And I think that that attunement is sort of the umbrella under which those qualities, those needs are met. And sort of within each of them, so the nurturance, protection, guidance, within each of them, there are we can only access that through self-attunement. And I think that attunement, like our earliest experiences of attunement, are actually what teach us how to feel ourselves, and actually to feel ourselves as a self, that we get seen and met. And when we experience that, we feel ourselves, and we actually get to, we internalize the sense of like, oh, I'm actually here. Like I'm here, I exist, I am. And so we learn self-attunement by being attuned to, we learn to feel ourselves by being felt. And attunement is a quality that is, it's a loving responsiveness. So it's not simply just being present, that it is a responsiveness. So it's an ongoing kind of conversation. It's just like a mother and a baby, the baby shifts, the mother shifts with her, the baby squawks, and the mother sort of parrots it back or mirrors it back. And it's through that sort of call and response, sort of dance of responsiveness, that we internalize this sense of where we are in space, what our needs are, and how to respond to them. And for many of us, women and men, for many of us, we didn't receive adequate attunement. And it's not because our mothers or our caregivers weren't good. they might not have had that attunement capacity themselves. They might have been stressed. And so there's a generational quality, there's a lineage, and self-attunement is also, for women, it gets sort of reinforced at a cultural level that self-attunement is selfish or self-centered. And so there's sort of a cultural imperative for women to not place their attention on their own felt internal experience. I mean, for so many reasons. So it can be fraught to make the journey back to rightful self-attunement for a woman who has had an attunement injury or an inadequate attunement early on.
It's beautiful, and it's such it reminds me of like the interconnectedness of all things and all beings. This thing of like, okay, can I only feel myself when someone else is also really feeling me? And it's kind of reflecting for me this really beautiful space that I arrive in when I'm with someone who has a really deep capacity for attunement. And there's like, again, it's like this, finally. Wow, it just feels so good. I kind of just want to bathe in it, And I feel that also just talking with you, Kristy. It's really beautiful and nourishing on such a profound, energetic level. Like,
yeah. Thank you. I think it is deeply nourishing to feel that kind of responsive presence, like it's the reaching back presence. And sometimes when we haven't had that, or we've experienced some rupture, chronic rupture, or like a great rupture, like actually losing our mother, when we haven't experienced it, the hunger for it can be so immense that it's almost painful to receive.
Yeah.
And I've observed both myself and other women going through this process of, for lack of a better word, sort of this self-reclamation that self-attunement is part of. That in this process, we may have to actually learn to tolerate attunement, like that reaching back kind of energy. We may have to learn to tolerate it first, because you can feel when somebody's actually not responsive and like is sort of refractory to attunement. Like you can feel the kind of pushing away, and it may be just energetic, or it may actually be like you can see them like loss of eye contact. What's really interesting is that baby girls have 4 times the neural receptors for eye gazing that baby boys do. And so that eye contact is, it really tells you I'm here with you. And so you can feel when somebody has had attunement, sort of injury or wounding, that they actually may be refractory to attunement. But in the process of like beginning to open it up, one of the things that we might feel is an immense hunger, like an immense, like sort of like this gaping abyss that is hard to be filled. And I think sometimes people, like women, can get kind of stuck in that, pathologizing it, or just not knowing that there is actually a way to get that filled, so that presence and connection and attunement can actually begin to feel nourishing, that we're not feeding an endless hunger, that we actually have gotten to the place where we can just kind of saturate in it and really receive it.
There's part of me that wants to ask, okay, Kristy, so what could someone who feels this do, or what could someone feel who feels this do? But my
Ask
sense,
away.
well, my sense of this journey and like is that it's such a deep, just feeling our way through bit by bit and slowly learning, slowly opening our eyes and being able to understand more and more about what our individual constitution is, what's too much, what's not enough, where we're feeling this aching, like where's the hunger, where's the yearning, and like bit by bit finding our way back to something that feels healthy and nourishing.
Yeah, it is highly individual, highly unique. And I mean, certainly part of my story was sort of pathologizing or making myself wrong for all of the places that I found myself in pain. And, you know, when I first began to sort of realize, oh, I'm suffering from something around attunement. I had been in a 12-step program for food addiction. And I really was convinced that for at least part of that time that food was an addiction. I have very different beliefs about it now, very different story. But I had this sort of awareness of like, oh, if this 12-step program went away, because I had a very controlled relationship with food up until then. And the 12-step program itself was highly controlling too. So there's that. But I had this awareness of like, oh, if this 12-step program went away, I would not know how to feed myself. Like I would not know how to feel safe in that experience of self-nourishment. And it was like a light bulb went off and I was like, wait, that's really wrong. Like that's not a normal human animal. Like I was at this time, I was still a perinatal nurse and a lactation consultant. So my world, like my work was around teaching mothers and fathers, but mostly mothers, the physical, emotional, physiological, and on my end, energetic and spiritual act of feeding another human being. And what I did not realize, I later realized, was that what I was actually doing was learning and then teaching attunement in the context of breastfeeding. And I had this insight of like, oh, I would not know how to feed myself. And that was not simply just about food, that there was for me a disconnection around learning how to identify a need, hunger, so just like the metaphor of food is so beautiful. And it's why I think so many women with attunement injuries have issues, quote unquote, issues around food and love and sex. But being able to feel hunger, to know how to respond to it in a way that I could experience self-trust and to actually get the need met. Like there was a huge part of sort of my recovery from the food stuff where like I could not actually conceive of meeting whatever this like yawning, aching sort of abyss of need was outside of trying to get it met through what I did with food, whether it was controlling it, restricting it or binging it or purging it. And it took me actually several years to sort of repattern inside my nervous system that I could get full physically and that fullness was actually okay, but that I could get full emotionally and it wasn't necessarily food that I was hungry for.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know I just said a lot, but
it's music to my ears. I mean, yeah, they're all so connected, right? And it comes down to this deeper theme of nourishment and how much I believe we feel deserving of receiving what we're really here to receive, which is love and life and experience and being filled with everything that is here. And I mean, it's really profound that you're working with women and teaching them how to breastfeed and supporting them with that. And it's like, wow, yeah, the nourishment that the mother gives to her baby, of course, that's going to contain all of her own feelings about nourishment. And even on a physical level, it's like a mother can only nourish the baby through her breast milk to the extent that she's physically nourished herself.
Absolutely. I knew when I was ready to transition out of nursing that the work was really, that I was very fluent. I'd really sort of reached, for me, a level of mastery in terms of like the clinical piece. What I really felt like I was doing towards the end was I would walk into a room and I could immediately, like I knew this from the beginning, but it really became clear what was happening because I didn't really know what I was experiencing when I first became a nurse. But I could walk into a room, a patient's room, because I worked mostly inpatient, and I could feel in the mother, I could feel emotionally and energetically her own mother story. Like in the hours after birth, because I mostly worked in postpartum and NICU, in the hours following the birth, it's like, it was almost like there was another person in the room. It was sort of like, and if her mother was in the room, it was like the pressure would be intense. Like I could feel this sort of energetic pressure in the room. But for a woman, really sometimes it's in the attempt to get pregnant, sometimes it's during the pregnancy, and sometimes it's not really until the birth experience itself, labor. But if there's any piece of her mother story that is painful, and I think it's many women who were under-mothered or unmothered, that I could feel that mother story as soon as I walked in the door, and it would show up in how she could or could not physically care for the baby, like her fear around holding the baby, her comfort or discomfort with how to position the baby relative to her body. It would unfold in these different, in sort of various different ways. And mostly what I focused on towards the end was what was happening inside of the mother's nervous system, because she really steers everything. Like her baby is going to give her feedback continually, but the mother's state really determines everything. I think, Jillian says that he leads, but the feminine frequency goes first. and with a mother and baby, like the feminine the mother's frequency, her physiology, like her physical, emotional, physiological state really determines what she can give to the baby. And it's beyond just like, is she well fed or well hydrated? Her level of anxiety can impact her milk supply, but even her fear that she's not enough, which is a refrain for so many women, would come up in the fears around having enough milk. Like I would hear that again and again, this fear that they would not have enough milk. And I always heard that as this fear that I'm not enough.
Yeah, I love what you're sharing about just like the deep sensitivity of the baby and how sensitive they are to the mother. And I mean, I'm not a mother yet, but I love being around animals for this reason, because They just feel and know everything. It's amazing.
They really do.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I would sort of joke about, I hope this doesn't get taken the wrong way, but usually, in the first day or two, there would come a point for most every woman who is breastfeeding or trying to breastfeed, because it is difficult and not all women are able to succeed in the way that they want. There would come a point where she would be so frustrated or discouraged, and if I could get her to cry, I like, if I could get a mother to cry, and not that I tried to provoke a woman to cry, but if I could get her to cry, I actually knew she'd be okay. Because in finally getting to this place where she could kind of let go of all of the sensation that she's holding, all of the fears, all of the uncertainty, all of the self-doubt, all of the grief, because I think that there's a lot of grief in becoming a mother that we do not talk about. But if she could let go of that wave of grief, it's almost like the tears would flow and the milk would flow and something would shift. And there's sort of a joke that I had with many of my colleagues. We'd be like, yeah, I got her to cry. It's all good. Like, we'd walk out of the room and it would be like, she's going to be just fine. Because there's something about being able to kind of unburden yourself from the fear that our love is inadequate.
Yeah, my gosh. And I mean, how many of us are afraid of that, right? Walking through life feeling afraid of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's actually one of the really interesting things that I discovered in the last, last 4 or 5 years was I thought for most of my life it was that I did not feel lovable, that I felt unworthy or unwantable was really sort of how it showed up for me. But as I sort of turned a corner in my own healing and sort of emotional and spiritual recovery, I realized it was really actually the deeper fear was that my love was unnecessary or not adequate. I think as much as some of us might not have received the love that we needed, that also meant that we did not have a place for our love to go.
Yeah. Definitely relate to that. Yeah, I'm like remembering, feeling like I wasn't receiving love and nourishment in the way that I needed. And knowing, I mean, also my mother stopped breastfeeding me quite early on. And I think or what I've been told, is that it was painful for her. It was painful for her. And I was biting, and it was painful for her. So she needed to stop. And I've always wondered about that, because I had a lot of problems with eating from a very young age, and a lot of issues with eating disorders and things like this. And for me, that link has also been, over time, it's became more obvious, but it makes sense to me that why my mother might want to stop doing something that feels so difficult, because I can only imagine how confronting and painful that is for the mother, and all the emotions that would come up if the mother hasn't, had therapy and done all the work around this, which, let's face it, how many of us get to do that, especially before we become mothers?
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. As soon as you said that, the biting. So one of the reasons newborns in particular bite is because the flow of the milk is too fast for them.
Wow.
So biting tends to be how they stop, like they staunch a fast flow. And, it's every situation is different, but that was like the first thought I had. And what that does is for a newborn, if there's a really fast, heavy flow, and this is like me geeking out for a moment on a subject that I really love to geek out on, but I want to draw, I want to sort of like make an analogy. So part of attunement as a mother and as a woman, part of attunement is actually, remember I said it's a loving responsiveness, a responsive kind of relationship. So it's feeling what's happening in the baby or the child or the lover. It's feeling what's happening in them and then sort of shifting, adjusting, or titrating so that it meets them. So loving is not giving what we want to give. It's learning how to give what wants to come through us. And the art is to give it in, or give the thing that is like, that touches the spot, like that meets the need, that, is just right. And so for a newborn, when there's a really fast, heavy flow, it's like being fed by a fire hose, which is actually highly anxiety producing. So if a mother doesn't know that she's got, maybe she has a lot more nipple pores, because there's a wide range in the number of pores. Nipples like a shower head and not a faucet. So if a mother doesn't know that she's got like a really big shower head, or has a really fast flow, because women's bodies are so beautifully like diverse. She doesn't know that about her own body. If she doesn't have like a wise woman who can sit next to her and tell her, oh, the baby choking and sputtering and like doing this with their hands means like they're actually experiencing stress. She doesn't know that. What she feels is the pain, baby biting, and a baby who's sort of irritated and angry with her. And if she's, like you said, not had this experience of, like a baby's cry actually produces, for a woman who's had postpartum depression, it can produce PTSD-like symptoms, just the baby crying. So if she's got all of this stuff on board, she may not be able to see, oh, actually my baby's experiencing stress with being fed. So you can see how like attunement is this really, like you said, very nuanced. It's also a very delicate thing. It's like as a mother, we're constantly needing, we may not be able to, but we're constantly needing to be able to sort of shift and adjust, change tack, feel what's happening, problem solve, MacGyver it, kind of finding a way around. But then what can happen inside of the baby's body is that eating itself can become a stressful experience. Like terror, anxiety, and then with a mother who's in pain and agitated, disconnection. I mean, like, talk about a setup for an eating disorder.
Yeah. I mean, I refused food, from a very young age. I wouldn't eat what was given to me. And it was like chronic, and I didn't understand it in myself. I just was like, I just can't have this. It's so, wow, it blows my mind.
Sounds like an oral aversion. That sounds like an oral aversion, which can happen with a lot of distress at the breast, like too fast flow, choking, being overwhelmed by the flow, biting and trying to slow the flow. Then eating can actually, if there's a lot of stress in the mother's response, or pain or loss for the baby in the mother's response, there can actually become like an oral aversion. I've seen that happen with babies and children that I've worked with. So some of those pieces can be painful to sort of look back on. And for me, anytime we can depathologize something we've experienced in our life, like an eating disorder, like I think that everything we do is highly adaptive. It may not be like functional, or like later on in life, but the things that we adapt, the ways that we adapt, like that not eating, to me, I see that as like, oh wait, there's some intelligence that's being communicated here. That's the only way that it can be communicated. But if we never get that contextualized as the wisest possible thing, it can be very hard to move on from it. Like for me, it was a significant sort of self-mothering to be able to finally say to myself that the eating disorder that I had for decades was the wisest thing I could have possibly done. And I sat in that spot for several years, and I'm not like, I'm talking like not that many years ago, like full grown adult woman, where I sat in this spot for several years of still being in an active eating disorder, but consciously sort of wrestling with, why is this the wisest thing that I could be doing? Why was this the wisest place I could have arrived at in my life?
I'm really curious, and of course you don't have to answer this, but I'm curious, what did you arrive to? What answer did you find?
Thank you for asking. As I said earlier, I realized like I would not know how to feed myself, and I really meant that both like at the physical level with food, but also like I don't think I really, until in late into my, probably like mid 40s. So like I said, not that long ago, probably to my mid 40s, I did not actually have a conscious relationship with my needs. I could not probably have articulated what I needed in terms of love. I didn't know, for instance, that I am someone who really requires, like all human animals, require like physical touch and affection.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like just even that piece of like physical contact, or like why it would move me so much. Like maybe I'm just a really late bloomer, but like some of these things took me a long time to arrive at. My marriage was like, I'm married to a wonderful man, beautiful, good. I think his integrity like no other human I've ever met. And he was really emotionally shut down for most of our marriage, not emotionally present. And I found having babies was like, between babies and teenagers, those are like the happiest times of my life. Everybody says I hate mothering teenagers. I love mothering teenagers, but babies in particular, because one of the things that I got from the experience of having babies and then working with babies, which, man, I was in it for the babies. As much as I love women, in it for the babies, was that babies actually require that they be on your body. So there was constant physical contact. Like my kids were never off my body. And this is way before the whole, like, like wearing them in slings. Like that was like, I predate slings. Maybe not like in most cultures, but like in the sort of American sort of baby culture. But they were never not on my body. And that actually deeply grounded my nervous system, although I did not know that's what was happening. So to kind of go back to your question, and I'm kind of tying this into motherhood because most of my self-growth happened as a result of mothering. So the eating disorder in part was I realized how I managed my very dysregulated nervous system. And it was also a way that I hid my own need from myself. Like I was really competent. I was really mature, very young. I was parentified. I was sort of like the kid who didn't have any problems. Like I was the really capable one who did well in school, who, I had a brother who was really unwell in many ways for most of my life. So not having any needs was really how I understood, like, that was the deal, is that I did not get to have needs. My needs I disappeared my needs to myself. And so the eating disorder really was sort of like a way of numbing while trying to get a need met. You know, high levels of anxiety, like eating, chewing, swallowing, that stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So there was self-soothing, and then there was, the controlling, and, where there is unmet need, there's also rage. So for me, there was binging, there was purging, and the purging was really highly numbing. And I think what it was really numbing was rage around not knowing how to manage, not knowing how to have needs, not knowing how to articulate them, and definitely not knowing how to get them met, or to have a need in relationship to another human being. Like all of that was foobarred, for lack of a better word, So like all of those pieces had to get teased out in the process of unwinding a really painful experience with food in my body.
Thank you for sharing. And I love the role of rage in all of this. For me, it feels like this. It's like this inferno that just rises up and says, like, I'm here. Like, I'm here.
That's exactly what it says.
On this earth, and like, I deserve to have my needs met. I deserve to be seen. I deserve to be loved. And fuck everything that taught me that was not the case.
Absolutely. That is exactly what it says. I mean, I love that you use those words, that I'm here, because this is one of the ways that I describe when I teach attunement, this is how I describe it. That attunement is, being seen, and on the receiving end. So it's like attunement is, oh, there you are. And on the receiving end, it's like, here I am. Like, I'm here. And I like that, like, I'm here, I'm solid, I exist, I have needs. When that, even if it's just like missed just a little bit, like if that's chronically missed again and again and again, that to me builds up this like well of rage. And that's functional, because that rage, like, I'm here, that is actually exactly what we're supposed to do. That's what our nervous system, like our threat detection system, is designed to tell us, is when there's an unmet need, we move out of that sort of safe to be in connection state, and we move into either fight or flight. So we mobilize, or we move, if we can't mobilize, we move into self-preservation, which is like sort of a freeze or collapse. And we stay in that frozen, sort of collapsed, self-preserving state until it's safe enough to mobilize. And when we can then mobilize, so taking action, like sometimes it's anger that actually gives us the energy to finally move. That's what is meant to propel us, if we're doing this consciously, toward the meeting of the need. But sometimes, like, if we've really gotten sort of this tortuous, sort of twisted experience inside of attunement and having our needs met and understanding the rightness of that, we can get stuck in loops around anger and collapse.
Yeah. I I love that we found a way to weave in the the rage and the fire piece, because it's your birthday today and you're an Aries and so am I, so it's fire season.
No kidding. When's your birthday?
The 9th.
Oh, some of my favorite people are Aries. Happy birthday to you coming
fire.
up. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Fire.
I have a lot of stuff in Aries.
Oh yeah? What else do you have in Aries? I'm so curious.
Oh, I would have to look at my chart because I'm not really that. My friend Nisia would really laugh at me because I only half know like a tiny little bit of astrology, but my chart is sort of looks like this. Like everything is in Aries, and then there's a couple, like one or two things over here, but it's like all like it's just like this one part of my chart.
Wow.
It looks very it looks extreme.
Well, Aries is pretty extreme, so makes sense. I love that, and I'd love to look at your chart. Maybe after we'll do a little chart looking at. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's been so profound connecting with you, and what a rich like variety of subjects we've touched on. And I love that we went on this little journey. So I have two last questions that I'd love to ask you about motherhood. And so the first one is, what would you really love for the maidens listening to this? What would you love for these maidens to know about motherhood?
It will be what I like to call a sea change. So, yes, learn as much as you can about your body, about babies. Ideally, babies, you don't need to learn everything about childhood development, but like do your research, get your supports in order. But a sea change in nautical terms, it's actually one of the most dangerous nautical maneuvers there is. It's leaving one vessel in open water and getting onto another vessel. And it's usually because the vessel that you're on is no longer seaworthy. And so motherhood is really this changing of vessels, and it will be terrifying and difficult. It will stretch you in ways that you could not possibly foresee or prepare for, which is exactly the point. And there's really no way to do it wrong. You know, I mean, even the mothers who have harmed their children, and I count myself as one of them, you know, I've caused my children a lot of pain at a certain time in their lives and my life. But motherhood really is a movement into a deeper relationship with self and with love. And it will require that you become someone anew, and that is never easy. It's never without pain and without loss. So I used to hear far too often, when particularly somebody else in the hospital, when someone would say, "What unit do you work on?" And I'd say, "I work on mother baby," or "I'm in NICU," they'd be like, "Oh," especially not NICU, but they'd be like, "Oh, you work in the happiest unit of the hospital." And I'd be like, dude, you have no fucking idea. It's really okay if it's scary, and it will be hard. It will also be filled with beauty and transcendent sweetness. But to know that if it feels painful, it's not that you're doing it wrong. It's that this is a sea change. you are leaving one vessel and getting into the, and boarding a vessel that is meant to make it the rest of the way.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And okay, I'm going to throw another question in. I can't help myself. So do you think that that anything can really prepare like a maiden for birth?
I would say if I had to do it over again, this is going to sound like a curveball, and hopefully this is like cool with your audience. I would say really get to know your body, but particularly your intimate anatomy with reverence. Like, explore your anatomy visually with your hands, like really understand what a miracle you are. Like, women's bodies are profoundly beautiful, and they are the vehicle of creation. And I think the more you can truly be in awe of your body, like, learn what happens when your breasts make milk. That shit is amazing. I could spend hours talking about everything that happens both in the mother's body and then with the baby's body, and how those two things, how the mother's body is actually responsive, like that there are like immune properties that are put into the breast milk when her body senses the baby's saliva and what's in the baby's saliva. I mean, like, learn about your bodies both in an academic way, in an embodied, like, visceral way, in a sensual and sexual way. Learn and be in awe, so that when the experience of stepping across that threshold comes, and that is pregnancy and labor and the weeks and months following giving birth, that you can be grounded in what I think is one of the most important things a woman ever really do for herself, and that is self-reverence. The state of like unself-conscious, like the unself-conscious sort of joy of beingness. The more that a maiden can do that, the more seaworthy her next vessel.
Thank you. And lastly, what would you love for the new mothers listening to know?
I guess I would say again that there's no way to do it wrong. Like, I just wish so many women could hear that. You're not doing it wrong. If there's pain, though, pain is always nature's indication that there's some adjustment that's required. And that may mean like at the breast, or that may mean the pain or distress or grief, that there's support. And if you don't have a mother that you can go to find some woman who will receive you as a mother would. I think that's a skill that I learned at a certain point in my life, to find women who could receive me as a mother, as the mother that I needed. And we're out there. And to let yourself be held by another woman. Like, that to me is an essential skill for any woman, is to learn how to be held by a trustworthy woman.
Thank you so much, Kristy. It's been Such a pleasure. So, where can others find you if they want to work with you or read more of your work or experience you? I'd love to point people in the right direction.
So I do a lot of writing on Facebook. That's actually how most people find me. I'm at Full Fed Woman on Instagram, just sort of transitioning most of my professional work to that. I also have a Substack where I publish a lot of my writing. And my next women's group will be a 12-week long exploration of self-attunement, self-nourishment, and self-love called True North. And they can always ping me if they're interested in either the group or the one-on-one work, either on Facebook or on Instagram, and a website forthcoming.
Yay! I love that. Thank you so much, Kristy.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure, Tamar.
You're listening to the Embodied Mystic podcast. Thank you for being here and for hanging out with me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and that it could serve you in some way. I'd love to hear from you. My inbox is always open. Let me know what spoke to you in this episode and if there was a moment that lit you up or brought you into deeper self-reflection. If you loved this episode, I'd be super grateful if you took a moment to leave a review or share with a friend. You can do this easily by visiting the link in the show notes. It's been a real pleasure connecting with you today, and see you soon.